Starting out on a perspective drawing, I sometimes find it helpful to draw in lines at the edge of my paper. This frames in my picture plane, and I can also use it as a guide for creating parallel lines. I also find it helpful sometimes to tape my paper down to a gridded cutting mat. This allows me again to create parallel lines. The other tools that I'll want to have are some pencils. I have both a lighter and a darker pencil, and a ruler or some sort of straight edge. This ruler that I'm using has a corked back so that it doesn't move when I set it down on the paper. I'm actually going to use the grid on the mat behind my paper to help me create a nice parallel horizon line, kind of right in the center of my page. The whole idea with one-point perspective is that all of the lines in your composition are converging at one point on your horizon line, typically around the middle of your horizon line. This is called your vanishing point. When I'm drawing in perspective, I find it helpful to sometimes have an object to help me envision what I'm trying to do. With one-point perspective, we're starting with one plane of an object, and then using our horizon line and our vanishing point to envision on this 2D piece of paper what the other planes of that object may look like, whether it's the top, the side, or the bottom. Perspective is all about creating illusions. In this case, the illusion of a 3D object on a 2D surface. I'm going to start by drawing a square on my paper. I'm using a ruler. You could use a straight edge or freehand it, but I do recommend using a ruler to start out. So I'm going to clean up these edges. I apologize for the shakiness of this video quality. But now that I have my square, this is the first face of our 3D object. I now need to extend it back to our vanishing point. I'm switching over to a lighter pencil, and what I'm going to do is take the corner, each corner of that square, and extend that point back to my vanishing point. What I've created by doing this is almost this like infinite 3D object that extends all the way back to my vanishing point. But if I go back to my matchbox, I can create a finite shape or a finite volume by just adding one more parallel vertical line. So I'm going to draw a line in that's parallel to the ones that I've already created, and this becomes the boundary of my volume back in space. So now what I've created is two planes of a three-dimensional object. I've created the illusion of this 3D shape. By drawing in some parallel horizontal lines, I can start to complete my cube kind of in an X-ray view, so I'm going to be able to see all 6 faces of my cube. I'm going to draw in a parallel line to both the top and the bottom, and then connect those points of intersection so that I have created all 6 planes. You can see all 6 of them there. The first cube that we drew was right at eye level, or right on our horizon line. I also want to draw a cube that's below eye level and one that's above eye level. I'm going to approach this in exactly the same way that I did that first cube. I have my square, and I'm going to extend the corners back to the vanishing point, extending all 4 corners back. I'll then go in and add a vertical line that's parallel to that first square that I drew, and also a horizontal line that's again parallel to that first square. This creates 2 additional planes. We have a side plane and a top plane in addition to that front plane. I can go in and finish out the back plane in this kind of X-ray view so you can see again all 6 faces of my cube. I'll do the same thing with the square that is above my horizon line, extending all 4 corners back to my vanishing point and drawing in some vertical and horizontal lines to frame in the boundaries of my cube. So I've gone through and erased all of my perspectival lines, and I'm just left with these front-facing planes. I have an object that's sitting at the horizon line, so I'm seeing 2 a front and a side plane, an object below the horizon line, so I'm seeing a front plane, a side, and a top, and an object above the horizon line, so I'm seeing a front, a side, and a bottom plane. Each of these objects appears to have a solid three-dimensional form that's going back in space. Now that we have a handle on 1-point perspective, let's move over to 2-point. Again, I'm going to put in my horizon lines. I'm using the grid to establish a line that's parallel to the rest of my paper. And whereas with 1-point perspective, everything was converging at 1 point on our horizon, with 2-point perspective, everything's going to converge at 2 different points, often at opposite ends of the horizon line. Let's look at our box of matches again. Whereas with 1-point perspective, we were starting with one entire face of our cube, and then using our vanishing point to imagine either one or more additional planes to our box. With 2-point perspective, we're starting with the edge, the intersection of two faces, and imagining how those two faces are going to extend back to our vanishing point. In that case, I'm going to start not by drawing an entire square, but by drawing just one line. This line is the intersection of two faces of what will be my cube. I'm then going to extend both the top and bottom of that line to my vanishing points. So I'll extend both those lines. And then let's take a look back at my matchbox. I'm going to use this as a guideline for figuring out the width and depth of my box. And I'll add in 2 more parallel lines that are parallel to that first line to finish out my cube. I'm now going to make sure that these 2 new vertical lines are also extending to both vanishing points. So I will go back and extend that one out to the left-hand vanishing point, and then this one to the right-hand vanishing point. So all 3 of our vertical lines are extending to both vanishing points. And what we have now is almost all of the faces of our cube are created. I'm going to go ahead and connect those 2 points of intersection. And as you can see, we're kind of looking at an X-ray view of my cube with all of its faces. I'm going to use a darker pencil to delineate the exterior of this cube to make it a little clearer what we're looking at. At this point, we have something sitting at our horizon line or at our eye level, but I want to draw something both above and below our eye level as well. I'm going to start in much the same way by just drawing one vertical line and extending the ends of that line to both of our vanishing points. I'll then go in and add 2 more vertical lines to indicate the width and depth of our cube. At this point, we have 2 planes of our cube created, but obviously we're missing the top plane. I'm going to do the same thing of extending the ends of my vertical lines to my vanishing points. That completes my top plane, and just like I did in the first cube, I can go through and extend all of my points to the vanishing points to complete that kind of X-ray view of my cube. Now we can see that this cube below the horizon line has 3 faces. We have 2 side faces and a top plane that's showing. I'll repeat the whole process with the box that I want to draw above the horizon line as well. I'm really going to increase the speed of my video now because at this point you should be understanding how perspective lines work, and you don't need to see me go through it step by step and explain everything. But as we see this drawing developing, you'll notice that as we may have expected, again we're going to see 3 faces on this cube, 2 side faces, and then the bottom plane. You can also work backwards. Let's say I freehand in this box and then realize that I want to put in some other elements, but I want to make sure that they sit on the same plane as this box. I can, if I want, extend the edges of the box into the picture plane and find where they converge. These convergence points are our vanishing points. And if I connect those vanishing points, I have my horizon line. And then from here, I'll be able to add other elements into my drawing and have them make sense perspectively. One thing that you may notice as you're working in perspective is that things start to get confusing, especially with all those perspectival lines in there. I like to draw those lines in lightly and then erase them later, as I did with this drawing. And what I'm left with is a series of solid cubes, or what appear to be solid cubes, on a two-dimensional piece of paper. Perspective is really all about creating illusion, and the illusion of perspective is definitely created here, where we see these boxes that appear to be going back in space in a couple different directions.